So I want to ask you a question. What is an inclusive work environment? Would you all please type in your answer? What is an inclusive work environment? What does that mean? Egalitarian? A cool one? Everyone is listened to and respected. Everyone feels welcome. Yep, you got it. That's where you type it. Respect, where we're able to influence. So we got a lot of good answers. Collaborative. Everyone is accepted, listened to, and respected. Everyone's contributing, help and respect each other. Everyone's involved. Those of you who are asking, is this where I type? You are correct. You are typing in the right spot. Psychologically safe, equally provides for each. People accept all people for who they are. Everyone is valued and respected. All right, so we have a lot of good answers here. Agreed with all of you. So inclusivity is a bit of a subjective term, but I think we can all agree ultimately it's about people feeling valued and respected in the end. So here's another question for you. Have you ever been mistreated at work? And mistreated is a big word. It could mean a lot of things, but have you ever been mistreated at work? Just type yes if you have, and I'm a yes as well. All right, so I know you all can't see the questions section there, but I can tell you a whole lot of people are typing in yes. Many people are, not many, but a couple people have said not at UCB, but I have before. So now let me ask you, what does it feel like to be mistreated? So my answer would be that it's isolating, frustrating, exhausting. Other words I'm seeing being typed in are dismal, demeaning, powerless, isolating and hurtful, demoralizing. Workplace bullying was hard on your mother, and so you've seen what it can do to a person. Frustrating, draining, powerless. You're thinking, what did I do wrong? Yeah, so it's confusing. Okay, so all of those words that you just shared about what it's like to be mistreated are exactly opposite of what an inclusive work environment looks like. So being mistreated, anything from incivility and rudeness at work, all the way up to worse, things like harassment and discrimination, all of those things really go against inclusivity. The feelings that people have are they feel excluded, not included. So my name is Catherine Matthijs-Sundell, and I am the consultant from Civility Partners who's been working with you for almost coming up on a year here. I am the consultant who ran the survey that we did and worked with some colleagues to get the statistical analysis and such done and some interviews. And we found in this survey that 30% of people in IS&T had witnessed harassment or discrimination. And then when we asked later in the survey, what would you do if you witnessed harassment or discrimination, we had a huge array of answers ranging from I would step in to I don't think I would do anything to I might talk to HR, or it depends. We saw a lot, depends on the circumstances. So what this training is about today is to help ensure that if there are 30% of people in IS&T that feel like they're witnessing something like harassment or discrimination, that they feel comfortable to speak up, whether in the moment or to the person who's doing the behavior, or to the person who's at the receiving end, or to managers or HR. So that's what this training is about today. So if you would please go to that first page of your handout, and you'll see this list of behaviors on the first page of your handout. If you could please just take a minute or two to look through these words. Where do you see similarities and differences? Where do you see, do you have questions? Do you have examples? So just comment on these behaviors here that you see. Let's have a conversation about what they are. I'm giving you a minute there. Can I repeat the question? Yeah, so my question is, take a look at these list of behaviors. Where do you see similarities? You know, what's similar with these behaviors? What are the differences between these behaviors? You might have an example to share regarding one of the behaviors. So I'm asking you to sort of comment on this list of behaviors and what they may have in common or not. They're all unacceptable. Some are more direct while others are indirect. Maybe the perpetrator's not even aware that they're acting in a certain way. They're not part of being a team. The difference is that they're kind of a degree over the course of the list. It gets worse and worse. They're all negative and involve hurting people. Harassment and discrimination are often intertwined. Some are about power. I've seen these behaviors in IS&T. Similarities: frequently an individual exhibits many of these. They're all destructive. And if I don't read your answer off, it doesn't mean it didn't come through. I'm getting a lot of answers, which is fantastic. I want the interaction. It just means I'm kind of reading them at random here. Conflict can be resolved in a healthy way. So conflict maybe stands out a little bit, for sure. There's suffering. Yeah, so some are subtle, so people may not even know they're happening, and that's why they kind of end up confused. Some are more obvious than others, for sure. So you all have it. So if you would flip to the next page in the workbook there, you'll find a model with all of these behaviors defined down below the model. So I want to talk you through the model, and this is really how all of these behaviors are related, which, as many of you noticed, they are sort of on a spectrum from not as awful to pretty awful, and some things in between. So at one end of the spectrum, at the low end of these negative behaviors, we have incivility, unprofessionalism, and microaggressions. So incivility is about rudeness, and unprofessionalism is sort of violating the professional norms of your profession. So professionalism will look different in IS&T versus a construction site or something. You know, what professionalism is changes. Incivility at work might be things like a rude email or a slight during a staff meeting, or you know, things that are you know, they're rude, they're hurtful. Do people go home and cry over them? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that they're not terrible. Someone says, my handout does not show, has microaggressions as the second word. The handout doesn't have microaggressions. Well, your handout should have microaggressions. Mine does. I'm not sure why yours doesn't. If it does not have microaggressions, go ahead and write it on there. Someone else says they can see the word microaggression, so I don't know what happened there. Okay, so these three words are about some slight mistreatment, but again, they're not going to, you know, if one person in a staff meeting feels slighted by some uncivil comment, are they going to go home and cry over it? No, they'll probably move past it if it's just that one time. Hopefully that individual would recognize what they did and apologize for it. And that's exactly right, John. If these lighter end of the spectrum behaviors go unchecked, it opens the door. So if we don't put a stop to these behaviors, as light and maybe less hurtful as they may be, they absolutely do build up over time. I want to talk about microaggressions for a second, and then we will get to exactly what you're saying, John. So microaggressions are here on this lighter end of the spectrum, but they do have their own meaning. So microaggressions are about discrimination. So it's incivility, you know, it's a light type of discrimination, but it's almost under the radar kind of discrimination. And most of the time, people aren't even aware that they're engaging in a microaggression. I'll give you an example, which is a good example of a microaggression, maybe not so much because of who said it, but what was said. So not to get political, but Trump during his presidential run made a speech about how the blacks love him and the gays love him. What is a microaggression about that? Why is that a microaggression? The blacks love me, the gays love me. Any thoughts? Yeah, so that word "the" is the problem, right? It says those people over there, they're an other. Another thing it does is lump people together. So all of those gay people who are not individual, they're all a group and they all love me, right? So they're not individuals. It makes them an other. And it's really saying they're over there and I'm over here. So it really creates a divide between him and that group. So that would be an example of a microaggression. So as someone said, if we do not resolve this type of lower level negative behavior, it absolutely can escalate into workplace bullying, or what California calls abusive conduct. Now, I've been reading academic literature and research on workplace bullying for about 15 years, and I've read probably most of the research from the last 40 years on that topic, and also have been working in the world of solving negative behaviors for 10 years. And I can tell you that very rarely does workplace bullying or abusive conduct start off real big with somebody's, people don't go into workplace bullying arms swinging. It does really and truly start off with some uncivil act, some small act. And, so maybe this person sends off a nasty email to someone about their performance or a mistake they made, and nobody does anything about it. So then a couple weeks later, maybe they do something else. They roll their eye in a staff meeting, and then, a month later, they do something else. And then so over time, this incivility gets more and more aggressive, more and more frequent, and it escalates into bullying. And eventually, the workplace bullying individual and the target come to realize that there's a power imbalance between them that is unhealthy and psychological. So conflict sits in between these two sections. Is conflict bad? Does it belong on my bad behavior spectrum? Someone says, no, it doesn't. Or maybe you're saying, no, it's not bad. Yeah. So conflict can absolutely be very good, right? Conflict, if it's constructive and you can work through it and people can put their emotions aside and have a level-headed conversation about their differences, it can absolutely be good. You can learn a lot about yourself and the other person through conflict. However, certainly incivility can exist in conflict. So one or both parties to the conflict can become fairly rude to each other. So it can be bad if that happens, and it can absolutely escalate into bullying if it's not resolved. So one or both parties may start to engage in workplace bullying as they get more and more frustrated over time. So that's why it's in there. Now, disclaimer, this is where I differentiate from the law a little bit, and your UC Berkeley policies. But I see workplace bullying as an overarching word that has categories. So one category of workplace bullying is bullying aimed at someone because of their protected class, right? So if I bully everyone I work with, and I'm just kind of a you-know-what, then that's called abusive conduct. It's equal opportunity bullying. According to the law, that is legal, though UC Berkeley certainly has a policy against workplace bullying. But if I bully a certain group of people because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, nationality, there's a long list, then the law says that is violating a person's civil rights, and that is illegal. So in my mind, though, and in my experience, and I hope you'll write this down, Workplace bullying and harassment are the same behaviors. It's just who you aim them at makes a difference. So just to clarify about the difference between discrimination and harassment, discrimination is about leaving people out. So if I don't hire you, or if I don't promote you because of your protected characteristic, that would be discrimination. Harassment is much more overt, and you'll often hear that phrase hostile work environment attached to it. So if the environment feels hostile because of these overt acts, then it's harassment. Now, bullying and harassment tend to be about 3 buckets of behaviors. The first bucket is humiliation, so pointing out mistakes in public, maybe publicly mocking someone for an idea, humiliating people, socially isolating them. Bullying also includes aggressive communication. So humiliation, aggressive communication. Aggressive communication is something that we can see. Aggressive body language, nasty emails, yelling, getting in someone's personal space. And then the third category of bullying and harassment is manipulation. So giving someone so much work that it's impossible for them to complete it, or giving them an impossible deadline, taking responsibilities from somebody without really explaining why, so they're sort of left waving in the wind and wondering about what's happening. Using performance evaluations as a way to keep someone down, even though they may be a good performer or a fair performer. Does that resonate with you? Does that sound okay? Any comments on that? Okay. All right, so I'm getting yes, yes, yes. Okay, so on the other side, we have mobbing and hazing. What does mobbing and hazing have in common? What are those 2 words? What are they about? Collective, yes, groups against the individual. It's a group activity. So mobbing and hazing are both about a group of people bullying one or more individuals. A small example of that is cliques. I have found cliques to be quite dangerous. So if you get a group of people who've worked together for quite a while, they can probably, not on purpose, but they tend to kind of form a clique, and people feel a little threatened by that. Maybe those people go out to lunch all the time and don't invite others, etc. So that is a small example. But so the difference between mobbing and hazing is that mobbing is about pushing people out. So, a group of people comes together in an attempt to, if we bully this person, hopefully they'll quit. Hazing is about bringing them in, right? So you work in a university, sometimes fraternities get in trouble for this. So you get, but the point of hazing is we're going to put you through a bunch of tests, and then if you pass, we will accept you into our group. And that absolutely happens at work as well. And someone says cliques are common in ISNT, so that's why we're doing this kind of training. So I know there's some things going on there that we're working through, hopefully making better. Someone says their mom experienced mobbing. Yeah, so you know what it does. Also seen as a victim with this behavior. Inner circles, yes, and we saw that phrase inner circle a lot in the survey for sure. So at the other end of the spectrum then is workplace violence. So we've gone from, lighter version to middle version to violence. What does workplace violence entail? What do you think of when you think of that phrase? Physical threat, also physical contact, threatening behavior, getting physical, chairs thrown, people screaming, yeah, throwing objects. Certainly shootings fall in there. Harassment certainly could entail workplace violence. Yeah, so violence does not necessarily have to include a punch or a gun, where we all know that really and truly is violence. Yeah, so someone else says the yelling and verbal aspect. Absolutely. So if somebody is yelling so kind of vigorously or angrily at another person, then that can absolutely count as workplace violence. So the law actually makes room for 3 levels of workplace violence. The level 1 violence is the extreme yelling, the getting in someone's personal space, the just creating fear, making threats, you'll be sorry you worked here. That counts as level 1 violence. Level 2 violence would be moving up the chain into things like throwing stuff, but not throwing it at other people, but maybe throwing it across the room, or dropping something on the floor real hard, blocking someone's way. So we've increased the fear factor. And then level 3 violence is actual touching. So, the punch or what have you. So you can see easily how something like bullying or harassment could really escalate into violence, and the line is pretty gray there. Just to give you an example, I specialize in coaching bullies, people who engage in aggressive behavior at work, and often they're high valued individuals. That's why the organization's willing to invest in their behavior change. But I have absolutely coached individuals. One guy in particular, people would describe that when he'd get angry, his chest would puff out, and his vein on his forehead would pop out, and he would just scream real crazy at people sometimes. And so I would say that he was escalating into violence. And in fact, the reason they decided to reach out for a coach is the individual gave someone a panic attack. So he yelled so crazy at someone that that person had a panic attack. And then the organization finally said, okay, we're going to put a stop to this. So these individuals who engage in bullying and aggressive behavior like that are often, they're valued because they bring results, and that bringing results comes from a real desire to be seen as uber competent. And so that works out well for the organization, but not so well for the people around. So if you would flip your page over, your handout, or go to the next page on your handout there, I've got a second model for you. And then we will move into more about kind of being an ally and what to say. But this model is important because I want you to understand that negativity is social. And so when I say negativity, I'm talking about all of those behaviors we just looked at, that wide range. It does not happen in a vacuum. It happens, in your workplace, in the context of IS&T, and with all of you around. So it's happening as a social phenomenon. So I want to talk you through the different roles you may play, because if you know about negative behavior, you're playing a role in it. And I want to talk you through and see if you can identify what roles you play now or may have played in the past, and certainly you can play more than one role at a time. So of course, the negative person and the target are part of the issue. However, other roles people may play is advocate. So you may have people who really are willing to speak out against the behavior. So these are the allies, the advocates. These are the people that will say, well, I'll go to HR with you, or they'll step in the moment. They're willing to kind of stand up against the negative behavior, and they may be on the target side, or they may be on the negative person's side. What's interesting about the negative person and the target is often they see each other as opposite. So you may have someone thinking, I'm a target, Bob is just a horrible bully, he's awful. And then Bob is thinking, man, I'm a target, Sally is horrible, she's a bully. So it's very interesting that often the negative person and the target see each other as the opposite role. So you may not be an advocate, maybe you've never stood up against negative behavior, but maybe you've been a counselor. A counselor is the ad hoc kind of, people can come to you to chat and vent, so if you're that person where an employee has come to you and said, gosh, I really hate this person, this is how they're treating me, it's awful, and they're venting to you, that makes you a counselor. Actually, a little factoid for you. The Canadian Safety Council, which is Canada's OSHA, They found that people who feel bullied talk about it up to 52% of their day. And who are they talking to? Other employees. So people who feel like they're being mistreated at work can spend over half their day talking about it with other employees. That's how distracting it is. So next up, you have outsiders. You may have people who are around it. Maybe they work in the same department as the negative person and the target, but they just don't see it for whatever reason. It's just not in their line of sight. And we did see this a lot in the survey. People were saying, I didn't know there was a problem in IS&T, so that would be outsider. Next up is mediator. Perhaps you've played this role before. So some of us, it's in our personality to try to step in and resolve things, help try to make things go smooth. So you're a mediator if you've ever tried to help people work it through. If you're a manager or supervisor, you may play this role unwillingly because you've got two employees coming to you to complain about the other one, and so you end up trying to mediate. So the last one is a reinforcer, and I want to talk about this one a little more, and I may strike a nerve with some of you, so I'll be curious to hear how you answer. So I could have put the word witness or bystander in that circle there, but witness and bystander sounds passive. You could witness a car accident. There really is nothing you can do. There's no choices to be made there until the car accident is over. You can decide to participate and help or not. But you know, the accident itself, there's nothing you can do. So you're a witness. But if you're at work every day and you're aware of negativity and you don't speak up against it, or you don't participate in some other way, then what are you saying? You're saying you're willing to tolerate that negativity or that negative behavior. So someone said my audio dropped. I'll say it again. If you make a choice every day that you witness negative behavior, if you make a choice not to step in and try to resolve it in some way, shape, or form, then you are telling the negativity, telling those people who are engaging in the behavior that you will tolerate the negativity. And that makes you a reinforcer. You're giving permission. I'm curious to hear how that sets with you, because over the 3 days I did this training on site, I got a huge variety of answers and it created some good conversation. So is that a fair statement? If you choose not to step in, you're a reinforcer. What do you think? Someone said the truth burns. All right, so someone else makes a good point. I imagine some feel powerless to step in, and I agree with that. So I guess I'll add the caveat. I'm not saying that I'm faulting you for not stepping in, or that's a problem, or, you know, I get it. I totally get it. You know, why you wouldn't step in, and we'll actually talk through that as part of this webinar, why people don't step in. So I get it. I'm not faulting you for it, but either way, if you choose not to step in, then you're reinforcing it. Someone said I was in a union and we were taught that anything that isn't fixing it is condoning it. Let's see, silence does not equal consent, but it's looked at that way. Okay. Yeah, so the thing is that silence sends a big message, right? In fact, I used to teach interpersonal communication in college, and at the college level, and we have a whole section on nonverbal communication, of course, and we communicate in a lot of nonverbal ways: eye contact, gestures, body language, the way we smell, the way we dress, but silence counts as a nonverbal communication. So the term reinforce sounds like you aren't you're rewarding the behavior, but you're not necessarily. Okay, that's fair. So the point is, whatever word we use, I do not like the word witness, because I feel like that is a pretty passive word. And again, I understand that there's a lot working against us as to why we don't willingly jump in, but your silence does send a message that you're willing to tolerate it, because you are willing to tolerate it if you're not stepping in. So let's go through the, yeah, someone says it well. Reinforcing is the impact irrespective of your intentions. Yes. Okay, so let's talk through some scenarios here. So scenario 1 on your handout says that Jenna never says hello or good morning to her peers as she walks through the hall, and she's always on her phone during staff meetings. Some people aren't bothered, but others are. What behavior is this? So out of the behaviors we just went over in the model, or our spectrum, what behavior is Jenna exhibiting? Incivility, unprofessionalism. Okay. Yep, so it ranges somewhere in there between incivility and unprofessionalism. But let me ask you a question. This scenario actually in my on-site training sparked way more conversation than I ever had imagined it could. This whole thing about saying hello or good morning when she walks through the hallway, some people were really adamant that that is not incivility, and we're kind of fighting for Jenna. Maybe Jenna is shy, you know, maybe she's on the spectrum. We had a couple people say that, and so her acknowledging the people she walks by could be really painful for her. So this was, so we had lots of conversation about this, which is a little harder on a webinar. But, you know, so something for us to think about. So then we have to think, well, you know, so my position personally is that if you're not acknowledging a human being as they walk by you, that's a pretty exclusive behavior, you know, to give someone that basic acknowledgement. We need acknowledgement just like we need food and water. But then if we are going to be inclusive, we have to be comfortable with other people making us uncomfortable sometimes with their own things. So something for us to think about as we think about what we could do. Now, what about being on the phone during staff meetings? Is that pretty rude or uncivil, or how are we feeling about that second part? Okay, so everybody's saying that's rude. Jay, you said you don't need acknowledgement walking down a street. Context is critical. So are you saying we don't, you know, because no, we don't need acknowledgement from strangers, but if this is a coworker, then maybe we do need acknowledgement. Okay, so yeah, so you guys are saying being on the phone is rude and unprofessional. Why go to the meeting if you're not going to participate? It's disruptive. Someone asked, did you mean on the phone as audio or texting? I guess when I wrote it, I was thinking of texting or, you know, doing social media or emails versus actually talking. I'll have to adjust that for the next time. She's always texting. Write that into my handout. So the conversation about behavior makes me uncomfortable. Which is tricky. What about when used by a religious person or a gay person? Yeah, where do we draw the line? So let's talk through that. That's a great point. I will come back to that. Walking through the hallway is okay, but not talking on the phone, that's not okay. Okay, so some of the things, you know, this is, it's great that I can see all of these comments. I wish you could all see each other's comments so that it could really be a discussion. All you get is the ones I read. But so some of the thoughts I have around this are like the meetings, you know, I think that's a cultural thing for an organization. So within your own team, if you're a manager or supervisor on this webinar, I would recommend an action item for you would be to maybe set some ground rules for team meetings if you do have people on their phones. You know, even at my trainings over the 3 days that I was doing them, you know, we'd have this big conversation, but everyone had their phone out on the table next to them, and some people would even look at it over the course of the training. So it was kind of interesting. So, something to think about. You and your team can decide together, are we bringing phones to meetings or not? And then if somebody has some personal issue happening outside of work and that's why they need their phone, then they need to maybe share that. Hey, I've got something happening, and so that's why my phone's out, just in case I get a call. Some people say I'm on my laptop at meetings, so maybe you're taking notes. But again, you may want to say, I'm taking notes, just so you know that's why I have my laptop open. So let's go back to this question about the cultural thing. If someone had said, well, where do we draw the line? Which leads us into the question here. Any ideas on what you might do as an ally to this? So you've got some people who feel bothered by Jenna's behavior. So there's some negativity happening. Some of us might perceive her behavior as uncivil or unprofessional. So could you step in some way? And what might that look like? And there's no right or wrong answer here. There's probably 6 different options. So let's get those out in the open. How could you participate in resolving this? You've got some people who see Jenna as negative. Use a little humor. Sure. So I've definitely heard that over the last 3 days. So maybe could make a joke. Someone had commented that if you're the meeting facilitator, maybe you could call on Jenna if she's on her phone in a meeting, so that you could, see if you can draw her in. So someone could explain to Jenna that she's presenting poorly in meetings. That would depend on your relationship with Jenna. If you're friends with Jenna, you may be just able to say, hey, look, feedback friend to friend. I noticed you're on your phone in meetings, probably doesn't sit well. You may want to consider that. I may not go to her and say, everybody thinks you're rude because you don't acknowledge them in the hallway. You really want to keep it to you. And you might say, I noticed that when I walk by, you don't acknowledge me. Just curious if anything's going on between us. Are we good? And then maybe she would say, I'm just really shy. Someone says another option would be to encourage the people who are bothered with her to talk to Jenna on their own and try to get to know her. So rather than, pardon my language, bitching about it and saying she's rude, maybe just go talk, encourage those people. Why don't you go have a conversation with her and find out? Maybe as a manager, pull her aside and ask her about anything going on. Yeah, for sure. Someone else, good point. Maybe Jenna's the victim. Maybe she's ignoring people because she feels bullied. So it's good to not assume negative intent. So we should maybe talk to her and just kind of find out what's happening with her. Perhaps Jenna's boss needs to be the one to give her the feedback. So you could go to her boss and say, just so you know, this is kind of the rumor going around. Perhaps you could chat with Jenna about it. Someone else says another idea is modeling. Be sure to say hi to the people you see at work. So if you start saying hi when you pass her, maybe she'll start saying hi to you. So perhaps you need to just start engaging in the behavior you're looking for. Someone says, don't put your socializing expectations on other people. Yeah, so if you happen to be by the water cooler, right, and there's a group of people talking about how rude Jenna is, perhaps you could say something like, hey guys, we don't know why Jenna doesn't say hi. We're assuming negative intention here. Could you, maybe talk to her, just kind of cut that kind of talk off. Okay, perfect. We got a lot of answers there. So the point is, though, this is not something where if you're aware that these people are bothered, there's many things we've just come up with, many ways to step in. Talk to Jenna, talk to Jenna's boss. Just start saying hi on your own. Tell the people who are complaining about it, maybe they should go talk to Jenna, or at least help them see that talking about it, complaining about Jenna isn't going to work either. That's negative also. I will share a story. When I was in college, my first college job, I ended up being a legal secretary. Long story, I was way underqualified, but ended up being a legal secretary for an attorney. I had worked in my father's law office in high school, and so that's why he ended up hiring me. But we were in like a co-working space for attorneys. So we rented this big office suite, and we just had a couple offices. And there were many other attorneys from other law firms in this same office suite. And these ladies who worked there, who had all worked there together for a while, and I am now very, very good friends with. But way back then, you know, I was 18, 19 years old. These women are all 10 years older than me and were friends. And as we started to become friends, they told me that they basically thought I was a royal you-know-what, because I never acknowledged them. I never said hello, and they just would all talk about what kind of a you know what I was. And it was just, so then when they were telling me this funny story, I'm like, well, you all never said hi to me either. So I was shy. Why would I go out of my way to talk to you? So this scenario really resonates with me. Okay, so in the end, we've all agreed, it sounds like, to address it. Okay, so scenario 2, Angela and Phyllis are both programmers for the same college. Angela is a newer programmer, and Phyllis has been working at the university for 10 years and has 25 years of programming experience. Phyllis criticizes Angela on a daily basis on how she looks and what she's wearing. She wears a hijab. She also refuses to respond to Angela's emails and answers her questions with rude remarks. Recently, Phyllis also started spreading rumors that Angela is going to be fired. What behavior is this? Bullying, discrimination, harassment, seeing lots of bullyings. Okay, so this is kind of back to my point about how close bullying and harassment are and the fact that the behaviors are the same. This is bullying, but when you throw in the hijab, all of a sudden it highlights the possibility that it could be harassment. And if Angela is the only person who wears a hijab or the only person of a certain religion, she could absolutely claim harassment. And what would happen if she did that is HR would do an investigation to find out if Phyllis is harassing Angela. And if other coworkers say she comments on the hijab, the internal investigator may point to harassment as the reasoning for this behavior, or her religion as the reason. So unfortunately, the answer to that question lies within an HR investigation. But just as us outsiders reading it, it is bullying, could possibly be harassment, depending on, the hijab is the curveball there. So what might you do if you worked with Angela and Phyllis? So you know this is going on. At the very least, we know you're getting rumors, you're hearing rumors. So you're aware of this. What might you do? Okay, so there's two options. You could talk to your own manager, whoever that may be, and say, I'm seeing this happening between these two people. You could go to Phyllis's manager and let Phyllis's manager know this is what's happening. Someone says you could talk to Phyllis herself. So if you have a relationship with Phyllis and feel comfortable, you could certainly go to Phyllis and say, hey, Phyllis, I'm noticing something's going on with you and Angela. You know, what's happening? See if you can get her to talk you through it and then figure out if you can help. Someone says go to Phyllis's manager, and if nothing changes, then go up to the next level. You could talk to Angela and give her resources. So that's another option. Talk to Angela and say, hey, I just wanted you to know you're not crazy. I see it too. I know about it. Happy to give you some resources. So you could be a counselor for Angela. I've heard this one a lot. Pump Angela up in front of Phyllis. So if Phyllis is being rude to Angela, you could kind of protect her. Well, hey, I'd like to hear what Angela has to say about this. You could talk to the ombuds office for sure. Squash the rumors when they're told. Yeah, so for sure, one active thing you could do is if, as you're hearing any kind of rumor, whoever's telling you the rumor, you could just say flat out, you know what, I really don't want to participate in rumors and gossip. So please, let's just end that conversation. So just putting your foot down with the gossip is an easy answer in all of this. Tell Angela you see what's happening. Encourage Angela to talk to her manager. Yeah, so there's a bunch of right answers here, and you could do whichever one of them resonates with you. We're all going to respond differently based on our personalities and our experiences and our relationships with these different players. So that's the point of this, is I want you to see that there are many options other than doing nothing. So good job. Okay, let's do a third scenario. It's on the next page. Marcus is Elena's supervisor. Elena and Marcus disagree about a new process, and Elena thought she could share her thoughts with Marcus. But since she did that, Marcus has been acting different and the relationship's changed. He's constantly criticizing Elena's work, and when she makes mistakes, he chastises her via email and copies their peers. He recently gave her a performance review that said she wasn't performing up to standard, and he gave her a 2 out of 5 on the ratings. Further, in a recent staff meeting, when Elena spoke up about a topic, Marcus told Elena to shut up. So what behavior is this? Yep, so conflict, bullying. Any other answers? Could be violence, depending on how that shut up is delivered. For sure, incivility and unprofessionalism, maybe harassment. So this is another example, again, of how these things are not super, there isn't a real strong line in between all these different behaviors. So we could say it's conflict that has escalated into bullying. Maybe, so now Marcus has escalated into bullying. I say it's for sure bullying. But then if Elena is the only woman in the department, she could potentially claim harassment and say, this is a hostile work environment. I'm the only woman and I'm the only one he treats this way. So again, it's sometimes hard to really pick through the line drawn between harassment and bullying. But I would say it's bullying. He's got public humiliation. He's got manipulation, assuming she's a okay performer, and aggressive communication. So it's got all three of the bullying behaviors. So what might you do? Now, Marcus has involved you. You have received some emails that you were CC'd on, and he's also publicly told Elena to shut up in a staff meeting you were in. So what can you do? So someone says Marcus needs supervisor training. For sure, he does. But what can you do? How can you participate in putting a stop to this behavior? Call him out on it, for sure. So I love that. So if you see this shut up in a meeting, I know not all of us are going to feel comfortable in the moment to say something, but hopefully some of us are comfortable enough to say something. And you could even just say, Marcus, whoa, 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 that was unprofessional. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to launch into any kind of lecture. Just, Marcus, calm down. You know, even something like that is you saying, I won't tolerate that. Let's see. So calling him out, you could talk to him. So if you feel comfortable with Marcus, you could go to him and say, hey, Marcus, what's happening with you and Elena? We're all noticing some, or I'm noticing some unprofessional behavior. You could talk to Elena. That's another option. So you could tell Elena that you're there for her and you're happy to support her. You could report the behavior to HR. You could point it to or tell Marcus's supervisor about it, or whoever is in charge of Marcus. Let Marcus know that he sent it to everyone and he's demeaning her. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the email specifically. Really and truly, what would you do if you received an email that you were CC'd on where somebody was being mistreated? Forward it to HR. Okay, so you could forward the email or to Marcus's manager for sure. Any other thoughts? Would anybody respond to Marcus directly? Talk in person about how CCing people is passive aggressive? Someone says maybe check first with Marcus to see if it was intentional that he CC'd. Okay. Respond or talk in person to Marcus. So here's my thought on replying to the email. I personally, this is just my own personal idea, would hit reply to all on that email and say something to the effect of, you know, yeah, please remove me from this thread. Someone just typed in. Or, you know, Marcus, this feels unprofessional. Could you keep us off these email chains? You know, and just, but I like the idea of hitting reply to all so that everybody else knows you're willing to speak out against the behavior. So that's why I feel like if you just went to Marcus, and maybe you could do that separately too. But if you did not hit reply to all, everybody's going to think that nobody stood up, and it perpetuates the, well, nobody else stood up, I guess I won't either. But if you hit reply to all, you're breaking into that culture of not speaking up and letting people know that you will speak up. So that's my thought. Yeah, so someone says we should create a culture where calling people out is acceptable. And I think that that's what we're working towards, right? We don't want to get too crazy with it, but right now you have a culture of not speaking out. And so nobody does. So if we can make it, you know, make it more acceptable to say things. Someone has a good point. If Marcus gets away with the behavior towards Elena, he'll just start doing it to others. Yeah, so again, not saying anything is telling Marcus you're tolerating his behavior. Okay, so let's move on to why people don't speak up. So again, someone says, isn't public criticism a form of rudeness? That's a good question. And in this case, I'm not suggesting you criticize Marcus or send a rude email back, but I do think if you hit reply to all and say something as simple as, please remove me from this thread, I like the idea of going a little farther and saying, Marcus, this thread feels unprofessional. Please remove me. You know, so yeah, you have to balance. Is that public criticism, or is it you telling Marcus publicly that you're not going to tolerate negative behavior? So there's no right or wrong answer. Okay, so let's talk about some barriers to stepping in. So as I said earlier, if you don't say anything, that makes you a reinforcer. But I'm not using that rudely, and you know, I definitely understand why people don't say anything. So let's talk through. There are many reasons why people don't speak up. So one is certainly fear of retaliation, right? So if you speak up to Marcus, for example, there's a fear. Is he going to come after me? You know, is the organization going to come after me? Is the organization going to support me? So fear of retaliation is the #1 reason people don't speak up. And you probably see in your handout there, 75% of people who feel harassed at work never report it. And that's according to 2 very separate research studies that occurred a couple years apart. So, you know, it's not just the people who are witnessing it, but people experiencing it aren't speaking up either. Something that's working against you at work is the pressure to speak logically. So what that refers to is you have cultural norm, every workplace has a cultural norm of speaking about tangible goals, ROI, budget, tasks, project management, you know, customer needs. Everything is very logical in the way it unfolds at work. Even our performance evaluations have a rating on them, right? It's kind of logical. I'm going to give you a 4 out of 5. But being harassed or bullied and witnessing those negative behaviors is not logical. And in fact, it's very illogical and confusing and emotional. And so by saying, I'd like for you to start to speak up when you see negative behavior, I'm asking you to go against a cultural normal workplace norm of speaking more logically. So there's this added pressure that you may not even be aware of, that I'm asking you to go against a cultural norm. Muted group theory is something else that's working against you. Very simply, it's a complicated theory, but simply, it's a sociological theory that says anytime you have a group of people together, you have a more powerful group that rises up and a less powerful group. And so you have IS&T, you're a big group of people. You know, some people are more powerful, others have fallen into the more powerless area. And that powerless group is therefore muted, right? Because they are powerless. They have to learn to communicate in the ways that the powerful can hear them. So that's a kind of a sociological thing that's working against you that there's nothing you can do about. But it's there. Organizational culture. So as we said, if you have a culture of not speaking up, then you know that's going to be hard to convince people that it's okay to start speaking up. The bystander effect is something else that's working against you. I'm sure some of you have heard of this phrase before. What is it, the bystander effect? Yeah, the idea that someone else will do it, right? So and interestingly, the bystander effect began getting researched in, I believe it was the 50s. A woman was raped in an apartment complex in the courtyard. And so all of these people around the courtyard who were home heard the rape happening, and not one single person called 911. And so, of course, sociologists found that very interesting and started studying it and realizing that everybody just thought someone else would do it. So the more people there are, the less likely we are to speak up because we think someone else will. Your previous experience maybe didn't go as planned. Maybe you have spoken up in the past and it didn't work out so well for you. So, or you got a closed door, or you were told, don't worry about it. So why would you speak up again? And then lastly, we know just from society, starting with Anita Hill on up to today, that making waves can really be career ending. So these are a lot of reasons. There's a million more why we don't speak up. Curious if any of these really resonate with you. Does one resonate more than others? Problem solvers are good at solving problems and identifying problems, but they can be seen as negative when they identify and bring them up when they're HR related. Sure. So if you're the person who sees problems and is calling for change, then someone might go, well, you're the problem. You're the one disrupting my work life, right? Making waves certainly is resonating. All of them resonate, some more than others. Someone says, did I hear you say that we should be aware of muted group theory, but we can't do anything about it? Yes, muted group theory is something that we have to work towards addressing. So over time, as we change the culture, hopefully we'll be able to even the playing field and get the idea is that the powerless group feels muted. So we're giving the, powerless group more of a voice, so they're not muted. Okay, someone says quite a few of them are very alarming and they're there at IS&T. Okay, so beyond these reasons, and again, there's many more, this is just a small list. There is a real basic reason that none of us speaks up when it comes to bullying, harassment, incivility, any of these behaviors we've been talking about. And that has to do with your reptilian brain. So you experience speaking up as a threat, for example, because you fear retaliation. So the thought of speaking up feels threatening to you, and that gives you anxiety. And you have to defend yourself against that anxiety, which means that you could fight or flee. So not speaking up is fleeing in this case. So you're saying, for example, if you watch Marcus tell Elena to shut up, that feels threatening to you. you feel anxiety about it, and rather than speaking up, maybe you decide, I just won't say anything, and that's fleeing. And fight or flight is a real big part of our everyday behavior. If you're interested in kind of sociology and the way people work, I challenge you to just think about fight or flight over the next few days, and you'll start to notice that people engage in fight or flight 90% of the time. Our behavior is fight or flight. It's quite interesting. Flight is easier in the workplace, sure. And it doesn't even have to relate to this. You know, for example, this presentation I'm giving right now, is it a real threat for me? No. You know, I give webinars and training all the time, but there's some anxiety there. I want you to get a lot out of it. It's important to me that you know, get some golden nuggets from this training and feel like it was a useful time spent. And so there's a little anxiety. So I have the choice to fight or flee, and I choose to fight, which means that I worked really hard on the materials. My assistant worked really hard on the materials. You know, I'm on right now, so I can fight for a good presentation. So right now, in this moment, I might be engaged in fight in the form of giving you a, you know, a really good presentation. So, you know, we engage in fight or flight all the time. Okay, so I see some good conversation here. Someone says, I disagree. If you say nothing, you're not fleeing, you're suppressing your response, which is a case of social force exceeding the reptilian brain. Okay, but suppressing your response fits under the flight category, I would say. Someone says, I'm doing a good job. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay. So the thing is, you know, this fight or flight response is applicable to all animals in the animal kingdom, right? Fish, bears, cats, dogs, mice. But the difference between us and all of those animals is that we have the ability to work through our anxieties. So, you know, if if a mouse sees a cat, that's a threat. The mouse feels anxious and the mouse flees. That's the only choice it has. Its instinct says flee. It does not stop and ask itself, you know, should I talk to the cat? Maybe the cat and I can build a relationship. All it can do is fight or flee. But we have the ability to work through that anxiety. That's one of the reasons that we are separated from the rest of the animal kingdom. So I'm going to ask you for a moment to brainstorm what are you anxious about? And some of you already really answered it when we were looking at that list. You know, really and truly, what are you anxious about? And then the more important question is, how do we work through it? So that's what the goal of this is here. How do we work through these anxieties so we feel more comfortable to speak up? So when you're ready, feel free to start typing in some answers. Okay, so one person says that we have a lot of examples of retaliation, so it is a real risk. So then the question is, how could we work through that fear, you know, based on those past experiences? How, you know, knowing that you've witnessed retaliation before, how can we all work through that? I'm seeing a lot of you mention retaliation. Okay, so one person says that anxiety about speaking up causes me to fight, and I speak up. So that's great. So people like you who feel like I'm always one to step in, I don't mind it. You could, part of something you can do to help people work through anxieties is to talk with them, help them understand the importance of speaking up and why you do it. Someone says, I feel anxiety about conflict. Yeah, so conflict can be a real anxiety provoker for some of us too. Some of us are kind of conflict avoidant. It makes us uncomfortable. So you'd have to figure out, how can I work through my avoidance of the conflict? By confronting the person who's doing the bad behavior, then you're retaliated against and you become the new target. Okay, so someone says, I'm a manager, I'm ready and willing to step in. Perfect. Awesome. Someone says, so great point. As a woman, sometimes women feel like if I speak up, I'm going to be seen as, what was the word that you used? Wait, where'd it go? I lost it. I lost you in my window there. Where'd it go? As a woman, coming across as shrill and aggressive. Yeah, so there is that whole societal thing about women not supposed to be aggressive. So if you speak up as a woman, are you, going against some social norms? Yeah, being a woman makes it difficult to speak up for sure. Um, women have that stigma that we're supposed to be, caring and emotional, and we're not supposed to speak up for stuff. Someone says, sometimes I'm not sure if it's my place or not to speak up. Okay, so I expect that what I say is right. So then in the moment I maybe lose out because you're focused on trying to get whatever you say right. You want to get it right. Yeah. Sometimes you may not speak up because you don't have the full picture or context to know how to approach the resolution. You don't want to misinterpret the conflict. It could create an issue when there wasn't any issues to begin with. Being in a minority could keep you from speaking up. Okay, so let's talk through some of these things. So first I'll say on the survey, we did see a nice chunk of comments when we asked, what would you do? A nice chunk of comments were that I would ask the individual if they wanted me to jump in or not before I did anything, which kind of speaks to this. I would want to get the full picture before I jumped in. And I guess I want to ask you, do you all agree with that? And do you feel like if you witness something going on and you can kind of see that someone's a target, if they tell you, I don't want you to speak up, I'm good, or like with Angela and Phyllis, maybe Angela would say, I don't care, it doesn't bother me, I just ignore Phyllis. Does that mean that you should leave it be, even though it's bothering you? Okay, good. I'm getting the right answer, which is no. So I did want to point out that so I don't want you to get permission from the person you perceive as the target, because as a witness, it's creating a negative environment for you too. And so I know you don't want to overstep, but it's not up to them to decide, no, let's just leave it be and let that person be mean, because it's bothering you too. And so, yes, I think if it's bothering you, you should do something. And if you know it's bothering Angela, even if she says, don't say anything, I would prefer you didn't. I don't want it to come back harder. You still have to report it. And by the way, if you're a manager or supervisor, by law, you have to report it if you think it's harassment or discrimination. So some of these other things you're saying about kind of what you've experienced in the past is that people are retaliated against for speaking up. So I wanted to comment on that because we're trying to work through our anxieties here. The goal of this training is to give people tools to speak up. And so I'm hoping that in doing that, some of us who may not have known what to say before, now you have some tools and you can feel more comfortable to speak up. I would also encourage you to all agree to speak up together. So if you're in a Marcus and Elena situation, I think one of the real fears we have in speaking up is that we'll be isolated, right? Well, I don't want to be the only one to speak up. And if you can all agree that you don't like Marcus's behavior and you don't want those emails anymore and you don't like the way he acts in staff meetings, then why does only one person have to do it? If you all speak up and tell Marcus you're not okay with the behavior, then you have much greater chance of being successful. There are power in numbers. So I'm not suggesting you go around and gossip about Marcus and like turn people against him. So there's a fine line here. But I do encourage you, if you see negative behavior in your department, for example, to find out how other people feel about it too, and see if you can all agree to speak up. So someone says, if I hear about later, then I can gather the facts and determine whether to act. So any other comments, thoughts on this? It looks like I had quite a few. Oh, so to your comment about if you speak up, you'd be worried that you want to get it right, and so maybe you just don't say anything at all. I guess what I'd say to that is don't worry about getting it right. Just worry about saying something. One of the trainings, someone had said, I don't know what I would say, and kind of the same comment. I just, it was on the shut up exercise, and she said, I think I would just be really floored that someone said that. I wouldn't know what to say. And I said, well, couldn't you just say, I'm floored, Marcus, that you just said that? So if anything, just describe how you feel right then in the moment. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just say something. You could even just say, whoa, Marcus. So it doesn't have to be perfect. So I want you to not worry about that. Okay, so let me give you some tools, because that's why we're all on this training. So I'm on the top of the next page where it says see something, say something on your handout. So I want to give you a couple tools for speaking up when you see something. So assertiveness is one tool. Assertiveness is the someone said, just don't tell Marcus to shut up. Yes, good point. Okay, so assertiveness is the ability to state your needs and wants without stepping on toes. It is the middle ground between passive and aggressive. So passive means people probably kind of walk on you. Aggressive means that you are maybe a bully. Assertive is somewhere in the middle. And assertiveness is a polite, professional, constructive skill. Like we said with conflict. Conflict is good if it's constructive. Well, being assertive is good if it's constructive. So we all have the right and responsibility to ourselves to set boundaries, and that's what assertiveness can do for you. So assertiveness involves 3 steps. The first is to validate the behavior, and I don't mean agree with it. It just means give some empathy. And I will give you an example here in a moment. But if you can start off with a little empathy, then you'll be much more able to open this person's mind to the next few things you're going to say. So the next thing you'll say is to describe the problem behavior and the impact it has, and then you'll offer up a solution. And if you've had any kind of communication skills training in your life ever, you probably have seen these 3 steps before. They may have looked a little different. Some trainers get fancy with their acronyms and stuff, but these 3 steps are well researched, and many communication experts and trainers use these 3 steps. So how does this sound? The first step is to give some empathy. So you might say, I know the time crunch we're on is stressful. So you're not agreeing with the behavior, just kind of saying, I get it. I understand why you're frustrated. But when you talk to me with a raised volume like that, it's hard for me to take in your solutions. So the problem is the raised volume. The consequence is now you can't hear. So then you offer up a solution for the future. When you point out mistakes moving forward, could you talk me through them so I can learn from you? So I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to get myself some water. Scenario 1 says you're walking down the hall and suddenly you pass a break room and you hear one employee blow up. He even yells and uses some choice words. What might you say using the 3 steps? So I want you to write out your answers. Feel free to write them out on a Post-it note first before you type them in. But I'd like to get some examples typed into the question box there of what you could say using these 3 steps. The second part of this is then we will talk about other options, because these 3 steps are not your only option. I'm sure you have other ideas, but let's start with the 3 steps. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Yes, scenario 1. So the one about walking down the hall and you pass the break room and you hear an employee blow up. So I'm on page 5 of the handout. I'm giving you some more time. I've only got about 2 answers so far. So I want to hear you use these 3 steps. By the way, on the back side of the page there, the next page, there are some ideas on what you could say using those 3 steps. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of things for validating. So you could say, it sounds like you're frustrated. I can see that you're angry. Oop, my question box got weird on me. You must be really hurt if you're using those words. What else do I see? I can hear that you're frustrated. It's clear that you're frustrated. You could just ask what's going on, or I can see that you're really upset. So those are all perfect answers for the validation piece. It's just to kind of say, I understand that you're upset, or I can see you're upset. And then you're going to describe the problem and the consequences. So someone says, you might say, when we lose our professionalism, everything else goes off the rails. Can we work through the issue after stepping back a bit? Or can I help in another way? Yeah, so that's a nice way to step in. So I can see that you're frustrated, but when you lose your professionalism, everything goes off the rails. So could we work through this and take a step back? Yeah, that's all you have to say. Someone else said for number 2, or the second part of it, you could say, when you use that type of language, it's hard for me to listen. Yeah, so this is, it has to roll off your tongue. It has to all come off in one breath. So it does take some practice. So for the third section about solutions, I've got, if this is about work, how about letting me help mediate? Yeah, so if you feel comfortable. Perfect. Someone said for the problem impact section, you could maybe try to roll back what you've heard and offer up some insight. Sure. So you could say something like, I can hear that you're frustrated about the deadline that's coming up or the project we're working on, but and then offering up some insight. Hey, it sounds like you're having a disagreement, but yelling and using profanity is not professional and causing other staff's work to be interrupted. Do you want to take a few minutes off? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so these 3 steps are not easy. You know, again, they do take some practice for sure. It takes some practice to be able to allow those things to roll off your tongue in one breath. So I recommend maybe taking some more time to think through it. And I've been telling my other classes this page on the next side there on page 6, where I've given you a bunch of ideas of things that you could say for each section. What I might do is go through that and highlight you know, 1 or 2 of the sentences that really resonate with you, and then you kind of have a go-to, so you're not having to think on the spot. To the previous point about feeling like you have to get it right, then you could sort of rehearse your, you know, what you might say. But again, it can be fairly easy, so don't make it too hard. But just saying, hey, I can hear you're frustrated. When you yell like that, it's really disruptive. Do you mind taking a step back and cooling off? Fairly simple. So what else could you do? So using the 3 steps, and by the way, what researchers have found is that these 3 steps really do seem to help diffuse the situation, because you're starting off with empathy and you're finishing off with collaboration. And that's what makes it so beautiful, is you are being very professional. This is not insubordination if you say it to your boss. You're offering a solution, you're giving empathy, so you're engaging in positive skills in doing this. But what else could you do? So you could use these 3 steps. What else? Other things you can think of. If this really happened, what else might you do other than those 3 steps? So for example, you know, they're in the break room, so maybe you could just kind of make yourself known. Just walk into the break room. So if you're someone who feels like, I would definitely never say anything, that's way out of my comfort zone, if you just walk into the break room and rummage through the refrigerator and make your presence known, that may be enough to put a stop to it. Someone says, I might say, whoa, what's going on here? You could say, sorry, it's been a stressful day, but yelling is unprofessional. You need to take a break. Someone else says, so this is scary because people are not receptive and you may end up being cursed out. And someone else says, well, maybe you could just shut the door so that you can't hear the yelling. So a couple things here. The yelling, as we said when we were doing this, the spectrum, depending on how angry the yelling is, it could be escalating into violence. We don't know how angry this person is. I didn't give those details. So I am not, I don't think shutting the door would be the best idea, just because I worry about the safety of the person at the receiving end of the yelling. So you may not want to, you know, kind of block them off. You could just go in and maybe say, hey, yelling's not appropriate, and grab the target of the yelling, grab that person's arm and just kind of pull them out of the break room, depending on how they look. You know, do they look pretty uncomfortable and scared? I like the idea of just, you could even just poke your head in and say, what's going on? Or you could say, hey, are you two okay? Or you could poke your head in and say, hey, did you know we can all hear you? So it could be something as simple as that, just to kind of diffuse it by saying, we can hear you. Are you okay? Those are simple ways to go about it. The 3 steps are helpful in diffusing, again, because it's really a positive way to go about it, giving some empathy and collaborating. Someone said, if the yelling keeps going, I would go home. Wait, you have to help, though. You can't go home. Someone said, call time out. Yeah, you could walk into the break room, make the T symbol, you know, time out, guys. So there's several different things you could do here. Okay, so let's do the second scenario. During a meeting, one person offers up an idea, and this is based on someone I coached, by the way. During a meeting, one person offers up an idea and another puts his feet on the table and leans back in his chair, and then he says, let me tell you why that's a stupid idea and it's not going to work. You decide to speak up. So what will you say in the moment if you saw this in a staff meeting? So it's hard to validate this one, right? But you could say, we can see you disagree with the idea, right? I'm seeing some other things. You could just say, look, there are no stupid ideas. You could say, hey, get your feet off the table, please. Okay. Other ideas about what you could say? Someone says you could ask, are you drunk? Leslie, keep going. It looks like, so you wrote, before you get started, I want to recognize that you have another opinion. Keep going on that one. So you could just say, hey, we want to hear the idea anyway. You could say, hey, let's consider what this person's saying. Someone says, you might say, well, it might be a stupid idea. Maybe we could address it more objectively. All right, I understand you don't agree with the idea, but the way you're communicating is not appropriate. Can you explain your thoughts without being disrespectful? That's great. Love it. Let's hear the idea and walk it through before we jump to conclusions. These are, you all have some great answers. Can we have a chat rather than dismiss it? Could you put your feet down and let's hear it out and then we can listen to your input? Yeah. So it sounds like you've all got some things in your head about what you might do here. So again, there's no right or wrong answers here. You have to do what works for you and your personality and your relationship with the individual. If we were going to use the 3 steps, it might sound something like this. Hey, we can all see that you disagree with the idea, but your body language and calling something stupid really shuts down the collaboration. Maybe you could take your feet off the table and we could talk through the idea objectively. So that's a way to kind of point out none of us in the room appreciate your body language and using stupid. I would say there's no stupid ideas and we want to hear everyone. If anyone disagrees with an idea, it's okay, but we need to come together. Yeah. Okay, so lots of great answers there. It looks like you all have some good ideas. So, you know, again, there's a bunch of ways to go about this. It could just be as simple as, hey, we're not calling ideas stupid, all the way up to using the 3 steps and everything in between that you've offered. So again, your homework assignment is to read what's on page 6 and pick out a sentence or 2 that seems to resonate with you and you feel like sounds natural and comfortable for you. And then, you know, that way you have a kind of a go-to with the 3 steps. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about microaggressions. And so I'm on the page 7 there. Let's talk through these 3 microaggressions and see if they even are microaggressions or what the deal is. So Jeff tells Audrey that she should avoid the construction site because even though it's not her fault, she's distracting to the men working. Is that a microaggression? What makes it a microaggression? Okay, so Audrey's the problem because she's a woman. Any other thoughts on it? It's demeaning. What do you mean, no, she is unaware? The person who made that comment. She's being blamed for being distracting, sorry. Yeah, it sounds like it's her fault for this rude behavior. Yeah, it's not her fault that men are distracted. And so then some other things too is that someone had said in one of the classes, I thought this made sense, that it's kind of like you're sort of insulting Audrey by saying maybe it's something about the way she's dressed or there's something about her that's distracting. So it's almost like Jeff making a pass at her, maybe, is how Audrey might perceive it. So it's, you know, she could take it a bunch of different ways. So, you know, and he's asking her to change her behavior because she's a woman. Okay, what about the next one, which is that during a discussion over lunch that started to turn a little political, Anna, who's Caucasian, tells her friend Robert, who's Nigerian and black, which is not written in there, that she is colorblind and treats everyone equally. What do you think? It's naive to say something like this. Okay. Why else is this? Why is this a microaggression to tell someone I'm colorblind? She's ignoring a reality that he probably suffers from discrimination. It negates Robert's experience. Yeah, so there's a lot of different things here. The fact that she brought it up says that she does notice color. She's saying, I'm ignoring that you're black. Someone says she used the word black. Talk to me more about that. So while you're typing in your answer there, yeah, so saying that you're colorblind is saying that I don't have any implicit bias, I don't discriminate. That's what she's trying to say, and so this is unintentional, certainly. But we all know that every single person has implicit bias, and we all know that right now, all we know about how to fight against implicit bias is to be self-aware. And so she's essentially saying, I'm not self-aware, I don't need to be. It's delusional. Someone wrote, yeah. So, and then the other piece is, so she's giving herself a lot more credit than deserved. We all have implicit bias, but some of you said this too, that it's discounting Robert's experiences. So we all, part of our worldview and our life and who we are has to do with how we've been treated throughout our lives. And so by discounting his color or saying she's colorblind, she's discounting his experiences and who he is and how he sees the world. So also a microaggression. Okay, we have one more. In a meeting, Julie turns to Roy and says, we really want to hear what you think. Roy is the only Asian in the room. Is this a microaggression? Correct. So this one's a little tricky. Not necessarily. It depends. We need more context, potentially. Right. So we don't know if it's a microaggression or not. It depends on the context for sure. So if they are talking about I don't know, I'm going to use a stereotype, forgive me. There's a stereotype that Asians are good at math, right? So if they're talking about some sort of math equation or number situation and Julie turns to Roy and says, we want to know what you think, unless he's really known to be the numbers guy, it would be a microaggression. If he's a subject matter expert, it's not a microaggression. If he is just the only person who hasn't said anything in the meeting and she wants to hear from him, it's not a microaggression. So yeah, he might just be quiet and she's trying to call him out. So, call him out, and I meant that in a polite way, call him out, draw him out, get him to respond. So, someone says we is defining him as someone in the out group. So possibly, yeah, so context matters here. So what I want to point out to you is underneath that, there are more things to say for stepping in. And you can see the tiny little print there where it says Goodman. This list and the very back of the handout, Appendix B, has more. Comes from Goodman, and if you wanted to Google it, you could see there's a PDF that's out there that was put out there by Goodman, and a lot of great ideas about what to say. So as my assistant and I were putting this training together, we definitely found there's a lot of advice about, well, when you see something, you should say something, but there isn't a lot of advice about exactly what to say, and that's why I'm trying to give you these resources, so you have that. So you have all of that there. Now, we can't do the countering behavior exercise because we're online. I do want to explain it away, though, because if you turn the page under countering behavior, you see a lot of horrible insults and microaggressions. And so what we were doing in the class is one person would read a negative statement so that somebody else at the table would be able to practice responding. And so in the classroom, people had the opportunity to kind of practice stepping in the moment. So we have to skip that because you all don't have that ability, but that's there if you want to practice with your teams or something. So we're going to skip over to something different. So one thing that we all need to recognize, and that's why we have to do culture change as part of the process of resolving some of the things that have gone on in IS&T. It's not just about a zero tolerance policy or pushing people out. It does have to be a culture change, and that's because though bad behavior is perpetrated by an individual, and individuals suffer from that bad behavior, the organization owns the behavior. It's the property of the organization. And what I'm getting at with this is, and this slide is not in your handout, there's an exercise in your handout. Researchers who have been looking at negative cultures for a long time have figured out that there are a lot of risk factors in an organization that would allow these behaviors to bubble up, right? So for example, number 6 underneath harassment, what researchers have found is that if an organization doesn't include minorities or there's a low representation of minorities, the organization is more likely to have harassment occurring. So that low representation of minorities is a risk factor for harassment. And similar to that, you know, on the bullying side, so for example, if you have a bureaucratic organization, which a university certainly is, you have a lot of highly intelligent people. There's some stress there with all of the budget cuts and stuff. So what researchers have found is that those types of characteristics in an organization create a risk factor for bullying. So your organization has some of these risk factors, and part of creating a culture where bullying and harassment don't occur is addressing these types of risk factors, and that's where culture comes in. And so I wanted to ask you just to think for a moment. It's easy to say, well, I can't control these things. These are organizational risk factors. I can't control bureaucracy at, you know, in IS&T or at UC Berkeley. But what you can do is participate in breaking these risk factors down. And so that's what I want to ask you with this. So on your worksheet there, you can see on the harassment side, what I'm asking you to do is to choose one of these risk factors and ask yourself, is there something I personally could do to help break the risk factor down? And so, for example, number 3, social networks and bonding that exclude women. And the example I have in the handout is that personally, you could ensure that social events occur in a variety of venues so that a variety of people feel comfortable. So you could insert yourself in that and help break that down. So that's what I'm asking you to do. Choose one from each side and then brainstorm, what could I personally do to break that risk factor down? While you're doing that, someone asked, what business sectors have the highest numbers of workplace bullying? The answer is there are 3 industries that seem to really allow bullying to thrive, and they are higher ed, healthcare, and government, because those 7 risk factors, and there's many more, tend to describe those 3 industries. I mean, I don't know if you get the Chronicle of Higher Ed or if you're aware of that, but there's a publication, Chronicle of Higher Ed. They have a ton of articles on workplace bullying there. Okay, so pick one item from each side, one risk factor from each side, and see if there's something you could do personally. And then type it into the question section there for me. Okay, so one person says, for number 4, I could speak up when I witness harassment, support the efforts to make changes. Yeah, so number 4 was that the harassment is built into the culture. So what can you do personally? You can speak up and try to stand up against that and support the efforts to make change. Perfect. Great job. Let's see, so someone says, for harassment number 6, I could encourage new position recruiting to get diversified pools of qualified applicants and ask what we're doing on this. Yeah, so you could put pressure on the organization to seek out more diversified, qualified applicants for sure. High stress environment suggests providing opportunities to get the stress out, acknowledge it, and have a shared time and let go a bit. Yeah, so very simply, if you have a high stress environment, maybe you're the one who says, hey, let's all go for a quick walk around the building and get a little blood flow going, get some sun. You know, things like that are enough to help reduce the stress a little bit and bring people back into reality. Couple people have said, I'm going to talk about pay. Someone says, as a manager, I can support my staff and help them identify and create their own roles and responsibilities. Yeah, so I assume you're talking about number 6 on the bullying side. So if you're a manager or supervisor, you absolutely have the ability to make roles and responsibilities clear, even if the job description isn't so clear. Let's see, harassment, exclusion of minorities. When hiring, target the job ads where they would be seen by minorities, write the job description language so it doesn't exclude people and doesn't have dog whistle phrases. Huh, okay, interesting phrase, dog whistle phrases. Yeah, so be better about where the ads go and how they're written. For number 3, become a friend and ask, become a friend of one of the guys and ask if I can tag along so that you're a female for sure. Help get roles and responsibilities in writing. Then begin discussions to clarify who does what. So you all did a great job with this. My in-person classes didn't do so well with this one. They all sort of stared at me blankly. So you all get a gold star. you beat the in-person classes on this exercise. So the point I'm trying to make is you can absolutely not wait around for the culture to change. Culture does not work that way. Culture comes from a place where everyone participates in creating it. Every single, I think there's 268 of you or something in ISMT. Every single one of you has the ability to adjust the culture. You influence the culture. So you absolutely cannot just kind of sit around and wait for culture to change. You have to be an active part in all of this. So hopefully that resonates with you. Someone says, so it's an us versus them. Oh yeah, it's the remote class versus the in-person class, yes. So lastly, I'll just ask you to reflect a little bit on what you learned today. Did you learn anything today that feels useful for you, or what was a nugget that you'll be able to take away? What are your next steps? So I'd love for you to type in some answers and then we'll wrap up. What are your next steps? What resonated with you? What'd you learn today? Give me a nugget that you picked up. Okay, so being able to more easily identify bullying. Great. The concept of sitting by and doing nothing is complicity. I love the validate, describe, and offer solution model. Perfect. Important to be proactive. How to say something, the we approach. The most useful thing is to help us speak up is the top management supports you telling us to. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't do this webinar and these trainings for free. So they're here to tell you that they want you to start speaking up. That's what these classes are about for sure. The negativity graphic was helpful, especially the counselors. Okay, perfect. Identifying inappropriate behavior. I would love to have been able to help my mother. Hey, so this, I won't call out your name, but you're talking about your mom. I've got several books that may be useful for her. If you want to contact me offline, I'd be happy to mail one to you. There are quite a few ways to intervene and help without being confrontational. I can speak up if I see it or hear it. So I'm just getting so many positive comments. So that's awesome. Thank you. Self-reflection on my own behavior. I can change the culture by speaking up. Awesome. So thank you so much for participating. I'm glad it looks like you really got a lot out of it. So that's great. Just wanted to make a couple quick announcements and then we'll pop off. One is you'll see the practice, which is right underneath reflection on the next page there. And so you could practice this with your teams. If you're a manager or supervisor, I really, really, really encourage you to use these scenarios in a staff meeting with your team and do what I did, read out the scenario, give people some time to talk with a partner and work through what they might do, and then talk about it. And it would be a great way for you and your team to start to figure out what's acceptable in your team, what the expectations are. So really and truly, if you're a manager or supervisor, use these scenarios to extend the learning. You also have a take-home assessment just to kind of measure your commitment to respect, and you could maybe find some places where you could improve your efforts through that. And then the last page has some more ideas of things you could say. Would love to know if Washington has similar protections. California is very employee friendly, and our list of what's protected is the longest, but I'm sure you could just Google Washington and harassment or something and figure out. I'm sure there's a list there for you online. All right, someone says come to Georgia. What's in Georgia? Why would we do that? I'm in San Diego. I'm pretty good, pretty happy here. All right, well, thank you all for joining me today. I appreciate the participation. It makes it a lot easier on me as your facilitator to run this. So my contact information is on the top there of the first page. You're going to be getting a survey from us that's just 5 questions or a little evaluation. Please, please, please fill it out so that we understand what you liked and didn't like, and what we need to do to improve, and we just want to make sure you got everything you needed. So thanks. Someone said my expectations were low and you far exceeded them. That was a fabulous compliment. Thank you so much. So yep, watch out for the survey. It's just a little Google form. It's 5 questions, and you'll be getting that here in the next maybe 10 minutes. And the recording will also be available for you to watch should you decide to watch it again. Thanks again. Have a great weekend.